I have one or two moments here. Welcome. How's everybody today? Welcome, everybody, to the Aspen Institute. It's a real pleasure to see so many friends. I know a number of the presidents from colleges have flown in from around the country, leaders of the Association of Community Colleges and others who have chosen to come in for this event today, and it really matters a lot to us. The Aspen Institute has been involved for a long time in leadership development. I think we have a dozen programs that are creating and sustaining networks of leaders in fields ranging from workforce development to poverty abatement in this country and elsewhere, to K-12 education. We're delighted today to be extending that work into the community college space with the release of our report on the Community College Presidency. You know, as in all of the other areas that we've entered, we know that there's already a rich and well-developed network of people who have been operating in this space. And again, want to thank so many of those who have spent so much of their careers working on leadership development. Thank you for being here today. The partner that we are working with on this is one of those organizations. Achieving the Dream is a network of 200 community colleges now that are working on institutional improvements aligned to improving student success. And it's been a real delight to work with them on the development of this report, and also we'll be working to try to bring together folks from their networks and the Aspen Prize Network over the course of the coming year together to learn from one another. So to continue the program, I'd like to invite my friend and colleague Carol Lincoln from Achieving the Dream to bring us to the next stages of today's event. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Josh, and thank you to all of you who are here today. We really appreciate that you've been able to carve some time out of a busy schedule. I know some of you have even traveled all across the country, made a very, very long flight to be here, and it's just a testament to how serious you are about the issue that we're here to talk about today. Achieving the Dream is really, really pleased to be in partnership with Aspen Institute on this effort. We agree with Aspen that this leadership in community college issue is both urgent and critical, and we're particularly interested in this because we see it essential that we support community college leaders as they drive the national reform movement. There's been tremendous momentum building across the country trying to increase the percentage of students who are successful at earning credentials that give them an opportunity to earn family-supporting wages. It's important to Achieving the Dream that we do everything within our power to make sure that there's always a solid presidency in the community college field that knows how to drive this reform, is committed to doing it, and has the resources and the opportunities to really continue to be leaders in the country. So that's our particular angle on this and why we care so deeply and are here today and are really pleased that so many of you are willing to be here as well. My job today is to do some introductions to help keep the agenda moving a good bit and to encourage all of you to become active participants in this conversation today. So one of the first things I want to do is recognize some of the folks that are in the audience that have helped make it possible to get to this day. The first one I want to acknowledge is Caroline Altman-Smith with the Kresge Foundation. Caroline was the one that provided the resources that enabled Aspen and Achieving the Dream to undertake this work. She's here today, and Caroline, we really appreciate the things you've done all along for the last several years trying to get to this point, and we appreciate you being the spokesperson at Kresge and really making sure that this is an item that doesn't leave anybody's radar screen. So thank you for being here, Caroline. And true to Caroline's way of operating, she has brought some of her colleagues from the foundation world with her as well, including Sherry Ranisu, who's here from the Lumina Foundation, and one of her colleagues. And Sherry, we thank you too for being here today. it's really important to us that the foundation world understand what we're trying to do, and I know they care about this issue deeply as well. There's other folks in the room who've been helping with this work. We've had an informal advisory team that's been working with us over the past 12 months. I'm looking at my colleagues Byron and Kay McClenny, who are always there when it matters, and I appreciate the advice and the time you've given to this subject. Charlene Nunley is in the room. Charlene, thank you for your efforts. Ken Ender is in the room. Mary Spildy. There's Achieving the Dream presidents. There's Aspen Prize presidents. And all of you have been very, very influential in trying to shape this message that's in the report that we've been working on. Mark Herzog is here with us. He's a board member of Achieving the Dreams board. We also have the chairman of our board is here today too, Bob Templin, and we'll introduce him more appropriately a little later. Scott Rawls is here. I see Van is here. Others of you are here from the Achieving the Dream Network, and we really thank you for your leadership and your commitment. There's two folks who couldn't be with us today, and I am really, really sorry as they are. We had hoped that Molly Broad, who is the president of the American Council on Education, would be here as our moderator. She was all set to be because she expressed her concern and care for this issue. Unfortunately, she had an unforeseen situation come up, and she's attending a funeral out of the area today and just couldn't be here, so we miss her deeply. The other person that we miss is Bill Trueheart, CEO of Achieving the Dream. He also had an unavoidable circumstance that did not leave him the option of being here today. But he cares very deeply about this work, and he wanted to make sure you all knew that he is deeply committed, as is the Achieving the Dream organization committed to this subject matter. With that, I also have the pleasure of a couple of special introductions. So I want to welcome and introduce Walter Bumpus and Narcissa Polonio. Walter, all of you know, is the president and CEO of the American Association of Community Colleges, which represents nearly 1,200 two-year institutions across the country. He was previously the president at Louisiana Community and Technical College System, and he was president of Brookhaven College in Dallas, Texas, going back a little ways. Walter is going to kick us off today with some remarks, his sense of the urgency and the dimensions of the problem that we're here to talk about today, the problem as well as the opportunity. And Narcissa Polonio, who's the Executive Vice President of Education, Research, and Board Leadership Service at the Association of Community College Trustees, is going to similarly make some comments about what the impact is on whether we have a sufficient diversity and a strong, powerful array of women and persons of color in the community college presidency, and what the current circumstances bode for making sure we have that diversity. Narcissa has worked with trustees and been in presidential searches. She understands the trustee world and their role in recruiting strong leaders. And so the two of them this afternoon are going to start us off with a few comments on their perspective. After that, when Narcissa completes her brief comments, Josh is going to return to the podium, and he is going to give us a quick overview of the highlights of the research report that we've been doing, and then he's going to moderate our panel for the afternoon. So with that, Walter, I'd love to give you the opportunity to say a few words about how you see this issue.
Thank you very much, Carol. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today with you, and I really want to salute Josh, Carol, and Bill for your leadership on this very, very important issue. It's some of the most important work that we have to do. I've got a couple of challenges. One, Josh asked me to set a context for challenges, and he said, take 5 minutes and do it, Walter. That's kind of tough. By the time I clear my throat, that's about 3. And then secondly, the second challenge I've got, I was previously scheduled to give a speech to the Southern Education Foundation over at the Willard Hotel. So I'm going to make a few remarks, leave, and then get back so that I can learn a lot more from the group that's going to be on the panel. I've got a couple things I'd like to reference today. One is I hope all of you had a chance to read our Reclaiming the American Dream report that came out of the 21st Century Commission of our association, ably led by one Kay McClenny in the back and probably a half dozen people on that commission in the room. But I want to read to you, and I won't read long, but it's just a paragraph that talks about this issue of leadership. because we worked on this commission report for about a year, and what we concluded was that leadership is so desperately needed now more than at any other time in our nation's history as it relates to community colleges. But if you allow me to just speak a little bit about leadership, it speaks to this point. A new joint effort of AACC and the Association of Community College Trustees promises to address these leadership issues, but the Commission believes deeply that further work is necessary. Community colleges have been developing leaders to maintain the inherited design. They need now to develop leaders to transform the design. Reshaping the community college of today to meet the needs of tomorrow means that community college leaders need to see change as it is, embrace it, and then indeed lead it. And I think that speaks volumes, Josh, about what you guys are proposing. I've got Angel Raw, my chief of staff, in the back, who's got some cards that have the 21st century recommendations on them. And I'd like to just have her share those with you, and maybe as we go forward throughout the course of our time together today, maybe we can reference some of that. Now, a little bit about the context of where we are. As I stated during the AACC conference, during the Hail and Farewell Luncheon, we've had 146 new presidents named between April of 12 and April of 13. That's significant. That's almost 10% of the community college presidents in the country. What's equally important, and we tend to get a letter, email, or phone call every time a new president's named so that we can update our database. We've had 31 new presidents named since AACC. And I would bet by the time I get back to my office today that there's been another one named. But that really points out the need that we have for leadership development. Some of you are familiar, and I know Josh in his leadership report referred to the data that Ken Philippi on our staff did as a part of our CEO survey. But we found that 43% of the current presidents are slated to retire in the next 5 years. You couple that with another 32% are scheduled to retire in 10 years. So that's 75% of our nation's leaders are expected to turn over. When I used to hear these figures, I had some doubt about that, but I think we're starting to see those figures come to fruition, and that really represents some significant issues for many of us. Today, we have more major openings than at any time in my career that I can recall. And Narcissus, that's a lot of work for you guys. I tend to recommend you guys a lot. But I can't recall a time, and some of you guys have been out here in the vineyards as long as I have, some a little less. But right now, we have openings in Jacksonville in Florida, Dallas, Houston, LA, Cooney, just to name a few. And also recently, we've had Cuyahoga, Johnson County, and Bunker Hill Field. So when you start to think about the jobs we have out there, some significant positions. What I would also submit to you today is that in all likelihood, the folks that get the Dallases and the Houstons and LAs won't be new presidents coming off the street. They'll be presidents, much like Alex Johnson going from Allegheny to Cuyahoga, who are sitting presidents and who will then require, with this ripple effect, another set of searches to commence. And so we've got a major challenge before us, and I'm sure our panel will talk about that today. You know, I've always advised by my kids not to talk about when I was in school and so forth, but I will talk a little bit about that. When I came along, and I, as a vice president and dean, I spent 18 years as a dean of students and vice president before I assumed my first presidency. And when I did that, my college paid for my sabbatical to go to University of Texas at Austin, and my college paid for my membership and fees to go to the Executive Leadership Institute, Gerardo. I was in the first ELI class. It's a lot different today, folks. And I can tell you one of the challenges that we're hearing about is the fee and the structure and the support that folks that want to be presidents today are getting. When I was in the ELI, that was 1988, we had 40 people in the class. I've had the distinct privilege of being invited back to speak often over the last few years. And Gerardo and I have been talking about ways we can align our two organizations to look at future presidents, future leaders, and so forth. Our participation in our future leader institutes now, and those are mid-managers, robust. We can roll out one and we get 35 people like that. And this year we're doing them regionally, and we're expecting to hopefully have probably close to 300 people all total in our future leader institutes. It's not the same with future president institutes. We used to get 25 to 30. We're now lucky if we can get 12 to 15. And so together last year, I believe we trained close to 40. You couple that with the training that Gerardo did and the ACCT, and you see there's a need for a lot of more training. We're not coming close to the 146 people that were trained. One of the things that we do at AACC each year, that I've been CEO, is I've specifically tried to meet with those, I'd call them new presidents, folks who have been president, and we've had folks everywhere from 10 days to 2 years. And I talk with them about what would you have liked to know more about before becoming CEO. And that's been very instructive for us, and it's helped to inform what Narcissa and ACCT and AACC are doing together regarding new presidents training, which I view as equally valuable as future presidents training. So I just wanted to kind of set a context for you as it relates to what's going on out there in the field. We see a need for much more work in this space. Josh, we welcome your and Bill's involvement. We've been talking all along about leadership and how important it is. But I'm one of those believe that leadership makes a difference. If you're going to have a great institution, you perhaps are going to need a really good CEO. And unfortunately, we got far too many turnovers right now. Some planned, some unplanned. And right now, when you look at, I mentioned Houston, Dallas, you got Philadelphia, you got Newark, New Jersey, Essex Community College. In fact, I've actually met with 3 boards of trustees in the last month about their searches. I don't do searches, we don't do searches. I always refer them to my colleagues from ACCT. But they're really struggling with trying to understand the new roles of presidents. What's the role of a president in student success? What's the appropriate role of the board in student success? What's the role of the president in understanding data? And again, we speak about a lot of this in our 21st Century Report, but the roles changed significantly than when I first walked into the presidency in 1990. When I talked to Rufus Glasper at Maricopa Community College, in the Maricopa Community College District, he tells me that 40% of the job description for his new presidents is fundraising. That's much different than it was for maybe when many of us became presidents. So when we start to talk about this whole issue of leadership, there are so many dimensions of it. I'm thrilled that we're having this kind of discussion, and AACC pledges to work very closely with our colleagues because there's a whole lot of work to be done and too few to do it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Walter. And I'm going to take 5 minutes to say ditto, ditto, ditto. And thank you for the promotion of all of our services. It is great to be here with a lot of friends. This is almost like a reunion in the way that many of us are the soldiers who are there working in the trenches trying to address some of these issues. So I do want to thank and congratulate Josh, Bill Trueheart, Carol Lincoln, and Walter also for the marvelous job he's doing. I'm actually supposed to be Noah Brown today. So I'm going to lower my voice, take part of my hair off, and make believe that I am Noah. And I've been given 5 minutes, again, to pretty much do part of what Walter did, but also speak about the issue of diversity in the presidency and the implications. But one of the things people know about me, and Byron in particular knows this, you give Narcissa an inch and she takes a mile. Because we work very closely in the student success arena. Here's the concern I have is that when we talk about leadership, we need to take 4 things into account. One is the role of the trustees, because to a large extent, they're the decision makers. And if the trustees follow the wrong process or make the wrong decisions or have the wrong expectations, then all we have is a musical chair of leadership. And that is more damaging to an institution than anything else, because an institution can lose 2 or 3 years of progress just simply by making a mistake. So we need to really, in the dialogue today, I want to encourage you to also keep in mind, so what is the role of that governing board? Not only in terms of identifying the leader, but also ensuring the success, ensuring that they're covering that person's back so that they can do the hard work around student success. So keep that in mind as you have your dialogue today. Also, I want you to keep a couple of facts in mind also. The American Council of Education does their presidency study, and in the latest findings, there's some real troubling information in there, particularly pertaining to community colleges. The number of African Americans presidents in this country is pretty much at the same level. We're not doing any real growth. What we're doing is, again, hate to go back to the same terminology, musical chair. Alex went from Pittsburgh to Cuyahoga. So what we're doing is training presidents at a smaller institution and then moving them to large. So we are celebrating and thinking that we're increasing our diversity, but we're not. So for African Americans, the number of presidents is still at the same level, and many of them, who we know in this room, are part of the group that is going to be retiring. So the numbers to replenish are not necessarily there. We have to be frank about that. Hispanics, here's the troubling finding. The actual number of Hispanic presidents in the community college sector has declined. That's the reality. That's hard to understand when you see that all the demographic data in this country shows otherwise. It's hard to understand when now we have the classification of Hispanic serving institution. And more so than the African American, the pipeline is not working on the behalf of the Hispanic community. When I look at faculty, when I look at deans, I don't see the numbers. So that's a crisis also that I hope you will discuss. The good news, though, you'll always have to give the audience some good news, is that women are doing well. No, we're not at 52% yet, right? But every year there's been significant gains. But when you look at this data and then you look at the composition of the board of trustees, you find something, I don't see it as a negative, but it's something we need to be aware of. The age, the typical age of our members of our governing boards is in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So understand that the generation that is serving in many of our boards is far apart from the generation of the students we're serving and the changes taking place in America. That's not a negative. It just creates an imperative for us to educate our governing boards. So keep that in mind, that it's both making them aware of their own role in preparing leaderships. The other thing is, if you look at diversity on the governing boards, we find that the typical pattern is that you have one or two as part of the board. You have either one woman, maybe two, and maybe one minority. So what makes this difficult, and in no way am I saying that it is the responsibility only of the female trustee or the African American trustee to worry about diversity. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's everybody's agenda. Everybody should work for. But the reality is that the pattern of governing boards in general looks very different, looks pretty much the same as it did 10, 20 years ago. And that's something for us to focus. However, there is a difference between appointed and elected boards. You will find much more diversity in states that have elected boards, such as California. So understand that when the people have a choice, they tend to reflect the community more, as opposed to when the trustees are appointed through the governor or the legislature, which is a totally different process. Now, in 5 minutes, obviously, I can't tell you all that you need to think about in these issues. I just wanted to bring out a couple of those points. Let me switch a minute in the 2.5 seconds I have left. We're also working very closely with AACC, and we're conducting a study on the presidency. We sent out a request for information from all community college presidents, and 400 have replied, which is incredible number. And we asked them questions regarding their journey to the presidency and their level of preparation. A lot of the findings are in tune with what you have indicated, but there's some troubling things I wanted to share. Many of them said in their preparation to the president, having administrative experience was extremely the most powerful experience they had. And many of them said before they became president, the majority felt extremely prepared to be presidents. Then we asked the second question, once you became president, did you feel extremely prepared? Only about 30% said they were extremely prepared. About 40 to 50 said somewhat. And they are really given some interesting information as to what additional skill sets would have been helpful. So the nice thing about this, as we work in partnership, the information that we have gathered hopefully will inform this initiative. We just gathered that information. We also have data on 254 of those presidents to break it down in terms of diversity, age groups, gender. So we'll be able to get a sense whether there are different patterns for minority presidents than other. All this work is being done partly because of the generosity of the Kresge Foundation. They've really have played a role in bringing us together. We all know that they're playing a leadership role, and I want to make sure that I acknowledge their contribution. And in behalf of Noah Brown, we appreciate being part of the dialogue, but the work ahead is going to take all of us. It is significant, and what we're talking about is what community colleges are going to look like for the next 30 years beyond our lifetime. So thank you for inviting us.
Thank you, Walter and Narcissa. I think the emphasis on the turnover that we're seeing right now and on demographic changes and the need for diversity is really a very powerful statement about what it is that we're going to need in the presidency moving forward and why it is we're releasing this report today. There are a number of other changes, though, that are happening that are really important for us to focus on that I think suggest that what's going to be needed in the future to be successful is really different than what's happened in the past. One is, and I think the most profound change that every leader understands and everybody who works in this space understands, is the shift from the dominant benchmark of success being access for community colleges to now one that suggests that access and success are critically important. And many people in this room have done work to try to help make that happen. Just to put a fine point on it, in the last 5 years, since 2007, in 2007 there were 1 or 2 states that had some measure of performance funding, meaning they were paying colleges for completing students and progressing students through, and not just for enrolling students. Today, that number is 12. There are 4 others that are transitioning to that. That's a full third of the states that are moving to performance funding systems. Another 19 have had hearings or governance committee meetings on this. So as an indication of how quickly things have changed from 2007 to 2012 to 2013, this is pretty remarkable. A second change that's important is really what's happened in state budgets. Again, during that same period, 2007 to 2012, that's a pretty short period of time, per student state funding for higher education fell by 25%. Those are real dollars. And some of that is because of enrollment growth, and at times of enrollment coming back down, the indications are that that may recover some. But I don't think anybody thinks that's going to recover fully. And as Jane Wellman, who may be here today, Jane, are you with us? And the Delta Cost Project points out, community colleges bear the brunt of that. They are they receive cuts during these times in per pupil funding far more than others do. A third important change is technology. You know, when I was growing up, the only time you ever heard the term MOOC was on cop shows, right? It was the characters that were unsavory, that nobody wanted to talk to. Today, it symbolizes a wave of technology that offers incredible opportunities and challenges for broader access, for no-cost access to higher education, and potentially for productivity. And I think part of what's happened with that is competition is growing, right? I mean, as you can deliver outside of brick-and-mortar ways higher education, online competitors, many of them for-profit, have grown. Again, in a 5-year period from 2005 to 2010, the share doubled in the for-profit sector from 5% to 10% of students. And many of the students that the for-profit organizations are serving are the same. They really are the same students that community colleges serve. So if you think about that range of changes, in addition to the turnover, in addition to the growing diversity on campuses and the need for more diverse leaders, what we're really talking about is needing more degrees of a higher quality aligned to labor market. Jobs are changing now too, right? They're changing more quickly. More degrees of a higher quality at a lower per pupil cost for a more diverse population. That is a very serious challenge, and one that has led us to do the research and release the report that we have today. So very briefly, we have the report. I won't go over all of the elements of it. What we've tried to do is, in addition to the very good research that AACC and ACCT have contributed, and we've been using some of it in the report, what we tried to do is try to come up with a profile of the leader who has seen great gains in student success, who has achieved high levels of student success, and try to compare that a little bit to what trustees may value in the hiring process, and compare it to the professional development opportunities that exist right now. So very briefly, the 5 characteristics, and we did this is really the opinions of the individuals who have walked the walk, so 14 college presidents who have seen high and improving levels of student success, right? So these are presidents that have actually done this work, and 9 experts in the field who have worked across a number of community colleges on student success goals. So this is bringing all their opinions together. We've identified 5 characteristics that are commonly believed to be associated with high levels of student success and are demonstrated by the individuals who have done this work. The first is actually a deep commitment to student success. Now, I think that sounds like put students first. You know, of course we all believe in students, and indeed, I don't think anybody who sits at the helm of a community college doesn't care about students. But what distinguishes the leaders that see high levels of student success? It really is almost a zealous interest in the student, even above the institution that they are leading. And so it really starts to inform the actions of what they do. And much of what we'll talk about in these other 4 characteristics flow from this idea that their life's work is about improving student success. And building an institution is subservient to that goal. Second is a willingness to take risks. This includes doing things like admitting that student success rates are too low. I'm cognizant of Ken Ender in the audience today, who likes to say that we should all be naming a number, right? If you're at 42% graduation rates today, we should name 60% as our goal with a time certain. You know, that may sound obvious, but I think a lot of presidents, as they are boosting their institutions and trying to gain funding, are shy about doing those kinds of things. And it's really hard to build urgency around a goal that's not named. The second is reallocating resources. In talking to people who have been involved in finance in higher education, Dennis Jones, Jane Wellman, others at the system level, one of the things that they've identified that presidents are sometimes reluctant to do is move resources around. And it is a power that they have. We're not talking about taking that risk callously or doing it in a way that is individual without the support of others around them. But often this is the kind of thing that upsets people, right? I mean, it can, in fact, lead to the closure of some programs or the reduction in size of programs. It can, in fact, lead to the pet projects of some people being not supported. And this is a critical kind of risk that presidents are taking. The third characteristic is the ability to manage effective change on campus. This is one of the most important and perhaps most overlooked characteristics of effective presidents. Community colleges are exceptionally complex institutions. They work with K-12, they work with, they work with industry, they work with four-year colleges, they have boards of directors, they have political concerns, community concerns. They're often involved in arts programs in the local community. I think with all of that external focus, there is an equal importance in focusing on changing the culture on the college campus. And that's really hard work. These are decentralized decision-making cultures. And what we've heard from the experts and from those who are engaged in this is that they're very intentional about creating urgency. They're very intentional about building plans that everybody is moving forward on together, and in good implementation and continuous improvement. And that process of doing change management is the third characteristic that we've identified that matters. Fourth is really a vision and ability to develop partnerships that extend outside of the institution. Very often, community colleges, I think every community college has partnerships, but these partnerships are designed by and large among exceptional presidents to foster student success. So even if working with a K-12 system to reduce the number of students who need remediation will cost resources for the college and actually cut enrollment, right? Because you no longer have the remedial students in your developmental education students on your campus. They're willing to spend those resources. Again, dedication to student success, but partnerships designed to improve student success regardless of the impact that they may have in the short term on your institution, at your institution. Similarly, partnerships with business are not just about getting new equipment, that's important, but guaranteed job opportunities and internships for students. These are the kinds of partnerships that exceptional presidents are building. And then fifth and finally, and I think Narcissa mentioned this in her comments, is fundraising and resource allocation. I think anybody who suggests that presidents are not going to have to raise a significant number of resources is fooling themselves, and that's not likely to change anytime soon. But what distinguishes exceptional presidents is that they are thinking entrepreneurially about finding resources. They really are business leaders, and they are allocating the resources accordingly for student success goals. Very briefly, having identified these 5 characteristics, we did some research. We talked to some search consultants who have collectively placed 500 community college presidents over the course of the last 20 years. And we asked them a similar kind of questions. And the full findings are in the report. But there are 2 things that appear to be happening in the hiring process that are exceptionally important that the current that don't really seem to align very well to these characteristics. The first is risk-taking. What we've heard time and time again is that the hiring process results in a kind of risk aversion, not wanting to hire presidents who are going to take risks. Now, we're not talking about bomb-throwing risk-takers, but we are talking about people who are willing to use the power they have for student success, feel this kind of urgency, and when push comes to shove between getting along and maybe doing something that's countercultural or pushes things hard, these individuals are willing to do it. Right now, it looks like the hiring process, the whole hiring process, and this includes trustees and faculty are often involved and community leaders, doesn't foster that kind of risk-taking president. The second is this idea of change management. What trustees value, which really matters, is a kind of communications and external partnership work. So in that way, it's really pretty well aligned with what leaders need. But what they sometimes seem to overlook, it appears, and maybe too often, is the real talent somebody has to move an institution from where they are to a different culture, to really move student success in these decentralized structures, to use the budgetary authority that they have for that. Finally, we looked at the curricula for 16 programs across the country. Now, a big caveat here, we combined EDD and PhD programs in community college leadership and some of the non-traditional programs, and we put all of the course descriptions together, mixed them all up, and we tried to figure out what it was that the focus seems to be. We are not talking about any individual program. There are good programs out there, we know that. But collectively, is what we're training for aligned with these 5 characteristics? And there we see actually more internal focus than external focus. And this is consistent, I think Narcissa and Walter and I have talked about this, that a lot of presidents come in and they had no idea what it meant to work with the legislature or with local businesses or with the K-12 system. They really had not gotten that kind of experience, both in terms of the politics, but how to align all of that and shift all of that towards a student success goal. And then the other thing that we found is that all of the core functions appear to be taught, but they're not aligned with student success. We don't have enough programs that are bringing people in and saying, your job, if you want to be in this program, your job will be to improve student success. And so they're teaching budgeting, but they're not teaching the elements of budgeting that align to student success, such as how do I compare 3 different approaches to improving developmental education student success and look at the efficiency of each in addition to effectiveness. Similarly, in terms of the mission and culture, lots of these programs impart knowledge about the mission and culture of community colleges. But we didn't see evidence that they were talking about what are the elements of that mission and culture that prevents redesign, And how do we work within that culture to redesign the institutions to improve student success? So our hope with this report is that all of those who are doing the hard work of hiring and developing leaders will compare what it is that we found with what it is that they're doing, and work with one another and with us to further develop the field. So that concludes the remarks with regard to the report. Carol will come up and introduce the panel, and we invite you to have a conversation about these findings and your perspective on this, both from the community college perspective, but also from other perspectives as well, from business, from K-12, from the nonprofit world. Leadership is different in each space, but it's also the same. So we really invite all of you who have had experiences in those fields to reflect on how these things compare to your experience that we found. Thanks.
Thank you, Josh. I'm going to invite our panel to come up and find a seat that's comfortable. And while you're doing that, I'm going to let everybody know who they are and what some of their accomplishments are, and you'll understand why we've asked them to be here. First is Jean Desravine, who is the Chief Executive Officer of New Leaders based in New York City. New Leaders is a $30 million annual operation focused on training leaders in high-need schools to raise student achievement. He has considerable leadership experience working previously for the Chancellor of New York City's public school system. We thought it would be interesting to pepper into this conversation somebody who comes from a world other than community colleges, and so his experience and leadership in the K-12 world is something that we want to add to this conversation today. We also have Lenore Radicio, who is the Vice Provost at Miami-Dade Miami-Dade College, which is the largest two-year institution that we have in our country. Lenore is responsible for leading student success initiatives at Miami-Dade that include Achieving the Dream as well as Completion by Design. And of course, we know that Miami-Dade has long been recognized as a leader among community colleges, including placing in the top 5 of the Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence. Sandy Shugart is the president of Valencia College, a position he's held for 13 years. Valencia won the inaugural Aspen Prize for Community College Education Excellence in 2011. Valencia has been recognized as a leader in the field by Excellencia in Education, Achieving the Dream, and others. We're proud to say that Valencia is a leader college in the Achieving the Dream initiative. Bob Templin has spent 11 years as president of Northern Virginia Community College. Prior to this post, Bob worked with technology industry in Northern Virginia to strengthen the private sector, create jobs, and attract more investment into the local economy. Under his leadership, Northern Virginia has increased its enrollment by 18,000 students. And in 2012, they awarded more associate degrees than any other two-year college in the nation. We're really proud that Bob has been the chairman of the board of Achieving the Dream for several years now, and that Northern Virginia is a leader college. With that, we also have Josh, and Josh is going to pitch some questions to this panel. They're going to give their sense of their view on these issues, and then once we've heard a bit from the panel, what we'll do is Josh will invite those of you who are in the audience to pitch some provocative questions and some challenging questions to see what we can learn and discuss here today. So Josh, I turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Carol. So I wanted to start with this idea of the changing environment. And Sandy and Bob, you're sitting at the helm of institutions. You've watched this over the last 5 years. You've experienced it. What are the one or two things that are most important to you in this changing environment that have an impact on you as leaders?
Well, so we have a confluence of conflicting forces, of declining resources, growing expectations, and an economy that's shifting very rapidly as well. A demographic revolution of students becoming much more diverse. And so I think when you put it together, the challenge that I have tried to define, and I've heard Josh and Sandy define it in different ways, is that the requirement that leaders face today are finding ways to to serve a greater number of more diverse students, so not fewer and not homogeneous, more students of greater diversity with significantly better outcomes for those students. Not incremental, significant outcomes at a declining cost per student. Those are the realities that we face, and you cannot do 2 of the 3. You have to do all 3. I figured out how to do 2 of the 3. Fewer students, same money, better outcomes, right? Better students, more students, better outcomes. But to try to do the 3. And the fact is, the current design that we have is broken. It won't work. It can't be done. And so we have to reimagine what it is that we're attempting to create, and then map backwards the kinds of functions, roles, relationships, and organizations that are needed to achieve that outcome. And I would even go so far as to say that the completion or student success agenda itself is morphing. And one of the questions I'm raising is, completion to what end? Just grabbing degrees and saying we've done it as success is not what the challenge is. The outcome is much more fundamental, maybe one that we'll talk about. But it is that commitment to that outcome and then redesigning the institution and the partnerships to achieve that paradoxical outcome.
Sandy?
I agree with all that, and I would add to it that we have a challenge that lies in the fact that there's scarcely any more self-absorbed organization in the world than a college or a university. And our natural attention is always inward. And when we talk about partnering and so forth, we usually historically have meant in a superficial way to get resources or to build relationships with employers and those sorts of things. But our institutions are nested now in a very complex and not fully functional ecosystem of institutions. What happens in K-12 is vitally important to what we do, but we're scarcely engaged. And when we are engaged, we're engaged at the highest level, not deeply in the organizations. What happens in receiving institutions, universities that receive our transfers, immensely important to us, but typically contained in a fairly mundane institution-centered articulation agreement, not deep partnerships at all. But what students experience is this crazy ecosystem, and they're moving in and out of it all the time, having experiences we scarcely understand. So a friend in a meeting I think you may have been in with me the other day caught it carefully. He said, when I hire senior leadership at my college, they think I'm hiring them to run something, and I'm not. I'm hiring them to have impact, and that's much more challenging than just running the institution.
I would welcome, I'll be posing questions to each of the panelists, but if you have comments on any of these subjects, please raise your hand and let us know. I'd like to turn to you, Lenore, next and talk a little bit about this idea of risk-taking. You are the Associate Provost for Student Success at the largest community college in the country. And I know that Achieving the Dream, you've been leading the efforts around the Achieving the Dream work, completion by design. A lot of that work is inherently risky. Talk a little bit from your perspective about how you as a leader are able to take risks. What is the role of the president in enabling that? And how do you view your job in enabling others to take risks as well?
So let me start with the president.
Yeah.
So I was sitting very comfortably in an academic dean's office at one of our campuses when I received a call, and I was asked by our college president to leave my very comfortable dean role that I had finally settled into and had that working like clockwork, and asked to take a temporary position on a grant-funded project to look at completion and improve completion rates. And so that was quite a decision to make, to move from a permanent position at an institution to something that was temporary and grant-funded. But he promised that it would all be okay, that I had the skills needed to help lead the effort, and that he would stand behind me and give me the support that I needed in order to lead this change process. And so that's where it began. And so for the first year, we're now into the second year of the student success initiatives at Miami-Dade College. and looking at how to completely revolutionize the way that we offer programs of study and the related support services to the students. And at the end of that first year, Dr. Padron made a very significant commitment to student success and completion at the institution by institutionalizing the Office of Student Achievement Initiatives. So now, as opposed to being just a grant project or another initiative that we've taken up, it is an inherent part of the institution and something that everybody turns to when they're looking at different projects that they want to put into place to improve student success. And so I think that that sort of a sense of keeping promises to the folks that you're allowing to take these risks and ensuring that they've got the resources available to them to help carry on these conversations and the support behind it. I think that's what's made the Student Achievement Initiative so successful thus far.
If you're comfortable, could you give us a specific example of something that might have been risky in another context, but for that you knew that you had support to do and were willing to take on?
I think one of the greatest challenges that we had during this first implementation year was institutionalizing certain processes at scale. And there were a lot of naysayers at all levels of the institution, from the faculty on up. We instituted mandatory boot camps for all of our first-time in college students. We instituted mandatory orientation. We instituted no more late registration, all in the same term. And at an institution of our size, even if we're looking at just the first-time in college students coming straight out of high school, that's a population of somewhere between 10 and 12,000 students. So it's doing something at scale. And it was the commitment from the college president and the senior administration that helped to make that possible. Because if we didn't have the support at that level, we weren't going to get it from all of the different levels in the organization. And so the moment that we saw that we had models in place from before that we knew would work, and it was just a matter of everybody just buckling down and trying it out and see how it works this first time around, with the promise to everybody that it was going to be really messy the first time around. It was not going to be perfect. We were going to make a lot of mistakes, but they were mistakes that we would learn from and fix for the next go-around.
Great, thank you. Jean, you come to us from the K-12 world, and you've been working on leadership development for some time. Why have you dedicated so much of your life to leadership in K-12 schools? I mean, tell us a little bit about that, and how does that experience and understanding that you have of the importance of leadership in K-12, as you read the report and hear what others are saying, where do you see points of intersection and perhaps divergence?
Sure. Thanks, Josh. So from our perspective, we've been doing this work now for 13 years. We've trained over 1,000 school leaders in the K-12 space, impacting over 250,000 kids. The single biggest driver for student achievement outcome in K-12 is the quality of a school teacher. If you get a great teacher in front of a kid, you can have tremendous impact. And yet what we see in the research is that students, particularly students in poverty, need great teachers back to back to back. That if you're going to close the achievement gap, you need at least 3 consecutive great teachers. And the only way that happens is through great school leadership, because the leader is responsible for hiring, training, motivating, supporting teachers. She's responsible for setting the vision, creating the culture. So we have not seen a great school without a great school leader. So that's why we think leadership is arguably the most important leverage point in K-12 education. And what are some of the characteristics that we have seen in great school leaders in K-12? And it speaks to some of the similarities in the report. First, an unwavering belief that every single child can learn at a high level, irrespective of social economic status. The important thing with the belief system, it's not something in our experience that we believe you can train. You've got to screen for belief. There's no training in the world that's going to get somebody to believe that every single child can learn at a high level. The second piece is you've got to have a compelling vision in order to get key stakeholders to buy in to that belief system. And what we've seen with the ones who are the most impactful, they're able to get key stakeholders both within the school building and outside, whether it's business community, the philanthropic community, the staff, to buy into that that vision. The final piece that really resonates is the willingness to take risk. And I'll give you a concrete example. One of the things that we often see that becomes a major obstacle to these conversations and to taking the work to the next level, people's viewpoints on racial issues and caste issues. And the leaders that's had the biggest impact in terms of driving student achievement outcomes are able to have the difficult conversations with their stakeholders, with their faculty, with their staff, in order to be able to say what this is ultimately about is student achievement gains, and I will do whatever it takes and have the frank conversations that unite the school building towards a shared purpose.
Great, thank you. As you all listen to Gene a little bit, reflections on the parallels between your understanding of community college leadership and his, I think, very compelling recitation of the qualities for exceptional K-12 leaders. Any thoughts?
Well, beliefs are part of culture. They're what shape culture, and what really resonated for me is the belief in every learner. And the beginning of the deep cultural change at Valencia 12, 15 years ago is caught in one of our big ideas, one of our catchphrases: anyone can learn anything under the right conditions. And naming that and working that issue so it became a part of the lore of the institution was fundamental to moving the needle on everything else we did. If you don't believe the people you're there to serve can benefit, there's just a plethora of excuses for not getting good results. You've got to deal with that issue first. So that's certainly a point of common interest.
Sandy, building on this idea of the relationship with K-12 and where you find two leaders that perhaps have these common beliefs, community colleges really are a pathway for many students from something to something else, and often that pathway is from K-12 to a four-year college. There's the transfer function that's being filled. What is the role of presidents in effectively building bridges that actually help make that happen? Can you say a little bit about those external partnerships with other educational institutions and your experience in what the qualities and actions of effective leaders are in doing that work?
Well, I can only speak from our particular experience, Josh, but the truth is that the value proposition that we make to students who are pursuing the transfer function is deeply flawed. Here's what they hear in most of the country. If you want to get a bachelor's degree, then consider coming to a community college. We're cheap, we're pretty convenient, and somebody will want some of your credit. That's, and most of the promises that are made at a higher level than that are lies. For years, people believed in Florida that going to a community college in Florida meant you had access to the state university near you. It's never been true. It's always been true that there was someone somewhere desperate enough to enroll you. Maybe West Florida, a brand new institution or something. And in most of the country, students are actively told, if you're interested in transfer, certainly don't waste any more time than you have to at the community college. Take as few hours as possible and then transfer. It's relatively rare to see where two institutions or more have developed an ecosystem that can make a value proposition to students that makes sense to them. And there are just a few doing that around the country now, experimenting with it in Austin. Nova does that very well in Northern Virginia. We do it in Orlando. Our commitment in conjunction with our primary partner of this, the University of Central Florida, was if you earn an associate's degree at Valencia, you are guaranteed admission to a selective institution, to UCF in town. It's the only choice in town for public higher education beyond Valencia. And that promise and the expectation that you don't transfer until you earn the degree has changed everything. There's a reason. Students are rational. There's a reason for them to graduate. Now that pushes back to, you mentioned the K-12 world, and we're in the process now in our consortium of trying to model student experience from the 7th grade to the bachelor's degree, and to share at the student unit record level all the data on their background, their performance characteristics, the pathways they've pursued, and so on, so we can understand what they're experiencing and conform the institutions to what we want them to experience, not what we think they're experiencing. And just making that transparent is a vital part of the interinstitutional cooperation. And lastly, we did this at the board level. Again, organizations are just like organisms. They will do things they think they need to do to survive or enhance themselves, even at the expense of their mission. So we went to the board level to make sure that departmental politics and those kinds of things didn't undo what we were trying to do. It's in board policy at both the university level and the community college level. And we brought in the other community colleges in the region, by the way. So it's a regional compact, not an individual compact. That addresses an issue that many experience around the country, particularly those in urban areas that have multi-campus systems, where one campus wants to do the right thing, but they're afraid they'll lose enrollment to the neighboring campus if they put an end to late registration, for example, or those sorts of things. So it's a regional infrastructure, it's an ecosystems approach, and we're only now beginning to understand how the K-12 world can be pulled into that. We have a process called Direct Connect. That's where the guarantee lives. It's a set of pathways for students, and we're trying to extend that now first into the high schools and then as deeply as the 7th grade. So students are beginning to entertain meta majors as early as possible in their work and align their curriculum to what it is they think they want to do. And we're able to follow their progress and identify where we're losing their interest and their commitment and adjust the system accordingly.
One of the powerful things I think that folks have latched onto in terms of these guarantees and 2+2 systems that really work, that move beyond standard articulation agreements, is productivity. Is that in fact it offers the opportunity for both families and for public taxpayers to achieve better student outcomes or good student outcomes at a lower per pupil cost. Bob, you've thought a lot about this issue of productivity, especially in a state where there are some private colleges that receive more per pupil funding than your public two-year college does. Say a little bit about your work and your thoughts about the role of leadership in bringing down the cost per degree and improving student outcomes through that mechanism.
So I'm going to try to tie together a couple of comments that were made. One is that, that leaders who are trying to be impactful rather than run an organization are thinking always about that impact and what it is that I'm doing and how it's related to the impact. And they're thinking of cost and an ecology. What frequently we're not prepared to do is to think about redesigning outside our organization.
Right.
And it's there that the greatest gains in both outcome, impact, and cost can be achieved. It's not within the institutions. And so we have these national conversations about the credit hour cost of instruction and that tuition is going up too quickly. Why don't we reframe the conversation and talk about the total cost of achieving the degree? And then redesign in the ecology to achieve the outcome. So for example, if we redesign across organizations, not articulation, jointly designing and holding common outcomes that none of us can achieve alone. So let's say that the outcome, quite frankly, isn't achieving a baccalaureate. It's achieving a portable credential of market value that can pay family-sustaining wages. If we can buy into that, then map backward, and let's look at a baccalaureate and how it might be redesigned together. As we all know, I think, that significant college-level learning can and does take place in high school. And if it were co-designed, not only would we prevent the need for remediation, but we would accelerate learning in high school. Many of us already have conventions called dual enrollment, early college. use that very intentionally for at least the first year of public higher education while still in high school at no expense to families. Follow on with that, I would say even an accelerated curriculum that within 18 months one could complete the equivalent of the next 2 years of college at the local community college. And then with an agreement with the university, a capstone experience that we all stand accountable with regard to the final outcome and are constantly adjusting the system to that. So we have the equivalent of a 4-year baccalaureate at an 70% discount over the cost of attending the university to start. Now, we have to make sure that the outcome is what we want, not just cheap, not just a lot. And so that's the way we have to think about this together. We can't solve the problem staying inside our institutions. And it takes leaders that are boundary crossers, that are comfortable with having these conversations. And we don't have enough of them.
Lenore, as a leader at an institution, but with many colleagues, both within your institution, at such a large place, who are at your level, and others who are aspiring to the college presidency, what is your view about the role of leaders such as yourself and presidents in terms of identifying the next generation? Do you think that presidents are thinking about that next generation in ways that align to the kinds of qualities we have in the report? And what advice would you have for leaders as they're thinking about developing the next generation moving forward, building on the story that we heard from you earlier?
I think one of the challenges in sort of growing your own, if you're looking in your institution, is to keep oneself from falling into just getting someone who's going to maintain the status quo. And I think when you're looking across the landscape of an institution to find who those future leaders are, you need to look for those who value the most integral beliefs of the institution, student success, for example, but at the same time are not afraid to push against the red tape, the processes that have just been created historically, for lack of a better term, and that are willing to think outside the box and to push to still uphold those beliefs and the central core and mission of the institution, but to really rethink the way we do things to bring us into the future. And as we look across, one of the key things that I think we need to do in order to build that next crop of leaders is to keep them from falling into the silos that we've created in higher education institutions. So we have faculty leaders, and we have student services leaders, and then you've got some leaders in the administration, but you don't see that cross-canvas type of development. So how do you take a faculty member and help them develop the knowledge of student services, of financial aid, of policy work, so that they can take the next step and move to the next level and help carry out those conversations that will move the institution forward. And I think that's where the missing link is right now. We tend to build up leaders within the individual silos and departments that we've created at the institution. And so as we start looking at developing programs to improve student success and completion in this new era that we've embarked on now, those cross-discipline, cross-area conversations are key. And the more venues that we can create for those, the more leaders we're going to help to develop.
So what I hear you saying is that even within institutions, there are, in the same way, thinking outside of the institution with partners as part of an ecosystem, understanding the college as an ecosystem,
right.
And both identifying the leaders who have the belief systems that will allow them to, and the talents to pursue leadership in an effective way, but also making sure that the opportunities allow them to understand these complex, varied functions that add up to student success within the institution. Jean, in your work, you've been at this for a long time, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. New Leaders for New Schools started a decade or more ago?
13 years ago.
13 years ago. And over the time, presumably, some mistakes have been made. And as you have thought about how you identify and bring in people to the fellowship program, which is the beginning of your leadership training, what lessons have you learned that might be relevant to the community college sector in terms of the importance of hiring, but also What have you learned about the hiring process and the qualities that you look for that when you started this work you wish you had known, or when new leaders with John Schnur had started the work, and I know you followed on soon after that?
It's a great question. First, it's a recognition that this is incredibly complex and humbling work, that if the ultimate measure is impact, that you have to have an orientation around continuous improvement. So what I'll highlight are a set of mistakes, I think. As we focused on student achievement outcomes, what became clear to us, our leaders were getting higher graduation rates, higher proficiency rate in math and reading, closing the achievement gap. And yet what became abundantly clear is that given our goal of having transformative leaders, changing the life trajectory of kids in poverty, we had ways to go. A set of things became abundantly clear. First, in the K-12 space, there's a tremendous level of energy and focus on credentials and degrees. So we spent about a year going into over 400 of the highest performing schools, both district schools, charter schools, across the country, to see what are the characteristics of the leaders driving the biggest gains. The first thing we found, there was no correlation between degrees and student achievement outcomes. The characteristics that we saw across the board, first, and it was alluded to in the report, and we spent a great deal of time talking about it, this unwavering belief in the potential of kids. Second, a willingness to create a culture of high expectations for the adults and the kids within the classroom. And third, incredible adult leadership skills, an ability to lead, motivate, inspire the adults within the school building, and oftentimes even adults outside of the school building, parents, community members, business members around this compelling vision. And based on that, we basically revamped our program. It became abundantly clear to us that a focus on credentials was not significant. The tendency to focus on traditional candidates was not enough, that we had to be open to looking at both traditional and non-traditional candidates. And finally, the piece that was the biggest shift was a recognition that if adult leadership skills is the most important characteristic, we want to see people demonstrate adult leadership skills before we bring them on into the principalship. So we changed the way we select our people from a 2-day selection process, which was quite rigorous, to now a year-long process where it's basically a farm team. If we've got 100 people that we want to go into positions across the country, we work with our partners to select 500 of them. And they're tasked with working with a set of teachers for an entire year, videotaping themselves, working with these teachers in 4 basic areas, using data to drive instruction, student efficacy, observation supervision, and how do you build an effective team. We watch those videos every single month. We provide them with feedback, and we only select people who demonstrate the ability to move teacher practice. And that was a fundamental shift for us, and it was quite a difficult shift, because once you've built a certain way of doing things, it's incredibly difficult to change. But it was the realization that we were not achieving the goals we set out, and we had to focus on how to get better.
Great. At the end of this, I'll invite the panel to make some closing remarks, but I'd like to open it up to the audience for questions. Gerardo de los Santos, you've been engaged with the League in leadership development for some time. Questions, comments on the report?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you to all the panelists for for your great comments. And it was alluded to, this idea of the non-traditional candidates, and I'd like to explore that a little further and get ideas from the panel. Because at the League for Innovation in our Executive Leadership Institute, that is a preparatory institute for the presidency that we've been running for 25 years, we're now starting to see an increase in the number of candidates that are non-traditional. And what I mean by that if we're talking about traditional, that they're coming from the instructional side of the house with a teaching background, and then move up to the vice presidency of instruction, and then they follow that academic path. And so internally, it is now we're seeing more that are coming from the finance side of the house, from the student services side of the house. But in addition to that, we're also seeing an increase of candidates that are coming from the corporate world, from public schools, superintendencies. And so what are the thoughts with regard to that in future leadership? What are some potential benefits, some implications, maybe even some concerns, surrounding these types of differences to prepare, a different set of leaders for the future?
I think it's a great comment. I think one of the deficiencies that we have in our nation is the fact that the role that community colleges play in our country and its potential competitiveness and preservation of democracy is not highly valued or widely recognized. Consequently, people who are interested in impact and doing significant work often never consider this as a field that they might want to go into. We have to begin talking outside of our profession. I find that there are many highly talented people that I think would consider leadership in a community college, but it is a formidable obstacle to enter, and there is no transition point for them to become acclimated very quickly, and that it's a deficiency that we have. So one of the benefits that I've had is that I was in community colleges. I went into business. I learned a lot about running a community college from having a business perspective. I know how valuable that could be to us. We have so few people with that perspective. And yet I'm convinced that great leaders from the corporate sector would come if invited and if we had a transition experience for them.
I'd like to respond too. I agree with all that. I would add that there's part of this is, what culture do you come from and what tools did you develop there and how transferable are they? I think our boundaries need to be a lot more permeable than they have been. I think we also need to remember that that we're in an industry that's one of a handful of what I would call as priestly professions, where we honor longevity and maturity and stability and boringness and things like that. And I think even within our sector, we need to pay a lot more attention to accelerating leaders into leadership. If you look at high-performing industries generally who care about leadership, they tend to really work at identifying people as early as they can in their careers as leaders. And while we treasure experience and being grounded and so on, the downside of that is you become a prisoner to the model that you were successful in. It's very hard to ask people to fold 4 jacks. And if you were 12 years as a professor and 8 years as a dean, of 7 years as a vice president, I can tell you exactly what you're going to do as a president. You're going to do what you've been doing all along. And I think there's just great opportunity to look for a kind of a youth movement. And I know in our own succession planning and talent development, I'm looking for people who are way too young for these jobs because they don't know how risky it is.
I'll add just a quick point because I'm in agreement with the 2 points that's been made. It would seem to me that one of the key pieces that we've been able to do, and I think Board of Trustees should consider, as long as you have a crystal clear view on your desired outcome in terms of what ultimately are you trying to achieve within your institution. Articulate that outcome, how you want to measure it, how you want to communicate it, and then it would seem that you would want to go look for candidates with demonstrated experience in achieving those type of outcomes, irrespective of where they come from, because the goal is to achieve those outcomes, and the other things are just not relevant.
Yes.
I'm Meryl Schwartz with Association of Governing Boards. I appreciated Lenore's recounting the support she had from the president to take risks, and the way that the president described the process of change with introducing scale models as messy and you're going to make mistakes. And I wonder, especially for the presidents on the panel, what kind of support you get from your boards for that kind of process, and how boards can best support presidents who are going to upset the way things have been going, maybe risk getting no confidence votes from their faculty, or at least public criticism, and how we can work with boards better to help build that support for risk-taking presidents.
If I could just take a quick point of privilege to add to the question, because about 300 college presidents, community college presidents, are hired by centralized systems. And I know, Bob, you have a board, but you also are part of one of those centralized systems. So if we could extend that to the boards and to the centralized leaders as well, because there's this intersection that happens in different places. But with that modification, we'll accept the question.
Just like our institutions have sort of reified cultures, so do boards. And most of them come to their board leadership with a very impoverished notion of what it is board members are asked to do. And they end up paying attention to success in terms of the business model almost exclusively. And we feed that by trying to keep them out of administration, by keeping them out of the conversations of how well we're achieving our mission. It's just sort of an unholy alliance we have. You stay on your side of the fence, we'll stay on our side of the fence. And as long as enrollment's okay and finances are okay and the buildings look pretty and so on, we'll be okay. I think all that has to change. And fundamental to our success as an institution was changing the conversation with the board and bringing the mission and our failure to fully achieve that mission into every board meeting. So we have a little conversation when we do the pre-board meetings, and that is, how's the cocktail mixed for the next board meeting? And the cocktail is 3 parts hope, 1 part despair. And the focus of the meeting when we're on is about our students learning, our students progressing, how are we adjusting the organization to get those outcomes, not who's getting the next architecture bid. And I mean, they have to do those things. But if you looked at the meetings in 2002 and the meetings in 2008, you see a profound difference. Nearly all of the ordinary stewardship of the institution they were used to exercising was in the consent agenda or in a committee. And nearly everything that was mission related was at the front of the agenda for strategic conversation. So both of us have to change. I think presidents have a big responsibility for reorienting boards to that. But I think the associations like AGB, ACE, ACCT, and others could do us great service, particularly by helping to reorient board chairs. They actually control, for the most part, the content and the spirit of that meeting. If we could get chairs to get this and partner with their presidents, we could change the culture of the board meetings as well.
I would say that that we've not done as good a job as presidents or boards themselves of putting on the table what's at stake for our country. And realizing that there's no other group that's going to take up the challenge on behalf of the community if we don't. And have a conversation, once again, about outcomes. What is it that we believe this institution was created to do? Teach classes? Give credit? Grant degrees? I don't think so. I think there's a greater purpose in mind. And so how are we doing with that greater purpose? How do we give it life, a name, a measure? And take a look at it really hard and ask ourselves, is this what we signed up for? Is this what it's all about? And community college has been doing that now for a little bit, thanks to Achieving the Dream and the AACC and the new direction that the association has given the movement. But we need a hard conversation with our board to realize the risk that is involved of not taking the action that is necessary. We have a demographic tsunami in our country occurring among people who traditionally have not been high learners. We have an economy that increasingly requires higher and higher levels of skill and knowledge. What are we going to do about that? And we can't wait for students to show up at our doors and teach them credit courses to try to solve that. And once we come to that agreement about what it is that needs to be done, then we've got to be willing to share the risk to do what's necessary. If I did not have board support for the journey that we've been on, and if everyone at the college didn't understand that that support was there was a mandate for change, a mandate, then I could not have been effective. It wouldn't have worked. In fact, you know, there's a tradition among our priestly occupation. Wait a few years, this will be gone. He will be gone.
It's like the Reformation.
Student service, it'll be gone, that's right. And you need to make it real clear, I'm not going anywhere, and I've got the full support of the board here. This is serious, serious stuff we're about.
We would be remiss for a moment if we could, and Byron, this is at some significant risk to you, because the last time I saw you, you had been on the road 27 out of the last 30 days largely doing this work. So now there may be more demand, which you, we'll see whether you can fit 33 days into a 30-day month. But Byron has been working closely with ACCT, with Narcissa and others, to do exactly this work, to try to set the stage in multiple meetings with boards of trustees at the state level and at the institutional level, to try to orient them and help them understand with the use of data. So for those of you who are interested in this strategy, we have really the person, one of the people doing the work preeminently in the country in that space, so I think that work has begun. And the question now is, how do we extend it to more states, and how do we then take that next stage of translating that understanding to the hiring and development processes of presidents? Yes, Ken.
Great discussion. And let me try to ask you to come back to the crisis. So we have this huge turnover of presidents coming. We've identified, I think, in this dialogue, some real challenges. So I guess two questions. One, how do you help a person who has an interest in this role get to be able to negotiate the waters that we have been talking about? And two, what would the best question the board might ask to figure out if they've got a candidate in front of them that can negotiate those waters? It's just my bias. I'm not talking about a graduate program and the syllabus of courses, but we've all had our own pathways. We've got two really successful presidents up there. How do we, with the urgency attached to it, bring a new cadre of leaders to the table? In 5 minutes or less.
I'll take a first stab at this. I think if we're looking, so let me talk specific about the case of growing your own. I think a lot of times, especially if you're looking for non-traditional folks who are minorities, women, a lot of times those leaders that are sort of hidden in your institution waiting to grow don't know that they have it in them to be a leader at the institution. And as a president or as an administrative leader at the institution, you need to recognize that spark in that individual and help nurture it and help them see that this pathway is a possibility. I think that that's the first piece. I think a lot of times if you're starting out as a faculty member or you're a department chair, a lot of times you don't see yourself in those positions. It just seems too daunting. And so the question is, how do you light that spark, and then how do you give that person the opportunities to develop the skills that they're going to need to move up the ladder?
So this is really, in addition to asking the right questions, we've got to populate the pool with more people who have these characteristics that we identified beforehand. Other thoughts on this idea of the right way to ferret out? We've struggled with this a little bit, particularly on risk-taking. I know it was Rick Lagan. Is Rick in the room? He was going to join us from AGB, but when we shared a draft of the report with him, he said, I think one of the hardest things you're going to find is identifying the risk takers. To your point, I think, how do we do this in the hiring process? Any other thoughts?
I think it's, I want to speak also to growing your own, but to hiring process as well real quickly. The largest single-site employer, private sector employer in the United States is around the corner for us. It's Walt Disney World. And everybody understands who works as a member of the cast at Disney that if you're in the same job for more than 2 years, you're a drone. You're headed down in your career, not up. They do this to the extreme. Their CEOs, every one of them, are local people, started collecting change in parking lots and worked their way up through Disney. So they have this extreme view of get the Disney DNA and so on, but they move them quickly, and they move them a lot, and they move them among jobs so they get to understand the whole business and so on. There's a kernel of that, of an idea in that for us, I think. Rather than sending people off to get fixed, I think the internal challenge for us is to give people meaningful work where they can develop and hone exactly the skills we're after. And we should be doing that not just to make the presidents out of them, but senior leaders generally. And so project after project, every time we have a tough problem to solve, we ought to be thinking, who can we give that to where it's going to just throw them completely into the deep end? Instead of, who can I give this to where I'm sure that I'll have a safe outcome? Okay? And put them out there for that. And that's how leaders are grown. It's in real work and reflection on real work, not in book learning. The question I would ask, Ken, that's a great one, would be something like this. If we give you this job, if you get this job, 8 years from now, what will be the story of your leadership? What impact will you have made? Okay? And the follow-up question would be, and what would be the most important idea that leveraged that story?
I just want to comment, because I think that you've just hit with your answer the most significant challenge that a prospective president will have, and Bob alluded to it. If the answer I give you is not one that the board says, that's fantastic, we've got your back, you know, we can't wait for you to get here, then I would say to a prospective president, it is about fit, and this ain't a good one, get out of there. So I think that's a great question. And Bob's point was so good. I mean, the work that you just don't have a prayer if they don't stand up there.
The gentleman in the Hawaiian shirt in the back.
I overdressed again.
Hi, my name is Rob Johnstone, and I'm the founder and president for the National Center of Inquiry and Improvement. But the reason I wanted to respond to both of these questions is I, not too long ago, was the exact person you were talking about. And Sandy and I actually met in 2006 at ELI when I was a 35-year-old provost at one of the league schools, the Foothill College. You talk about risk-taking. A president at Foothill hired a 35-year-old who'd never been a full-time faculty or a dean and was a strategic consultant in industry. And the good news, I think, for the field is within 2 years, I've been asking to apply for a lot of presidencies across California. And the experience from ELI and discussion I had with Sandy was about exactly the issue you described, Ken, about the idea of what is someone who is a risk taker and wants to be a thought leader and a risk taker and actually move the needle on student outcomes. Where does that person fit in 97% of the environments in which they are trying to land? And I talked to Sandy about this. I remember the question I asked you at the time, Sandy, is where is the place for a risk taker and a thought leader in this field? And because it seems to me from my analysis at the time that it wasn't in most of the presidencies that were becoming available. And because of this exact issue of, there was no way I was ever going to answer that question you asked in a way that was going to satisfy most boards, because I wasn't interested in the static quo. And so the good news is, and I think this is due to achieving the dream, due to some of the things that ACCT has tried to do, we've seen the needle move. But there's a cadre of young people in my age group, in the young 40s now, who are in their late 30s, who are incredibly hesitant to move into this path, because the last thing we want to do, frankly, and I use this term all the time in presentations, is feed the machine.
Right.
You know, there's the role of leadership to change things, to change the lives of students and improve outcomes, and there's the role of feeding the machine. And I chose a different path to help try to do that, and at some point I hope to come back to this one. But it is a huge challenge, and Gerardo's seen many of these young leaders across the country in his programs, and so have all of you, to create these conditions that make it such that we would want to do that. And by the way, the other problem with young people doing this is how many of us can think of wanting to be a president for 30 years? you know, or 25 years. Yeah, exactly. Sandy's one of the top ones in the country. So I think Sandy, I ask you the question again. Do you think your answer to that is different today, 7 years later, when I asked you it the first time?
Yeah. Well, let me ask the question back. What would we all have to do so that at least 1 in 4 boards of trustees would be deeply dissatisfied with a president who doubled the endowment and tripled the enrollment? That's the problem. It's our, success in the old model is the problem. So if, Byron's work, bringing teams of trustees with their presidents together for the courageous conversations around mission performance, not business performance, for example. The work at ACCT, what you do with league board members, Gerardo, those are all good things, but we've got to scale that. We don't control how they get into those jobs, but we've got to change the conversation in the boardroom so that they would be deeply dissatisfied, with the man in the gray flannel suit.
And Sandy, one other thing to do sometimes if you're really going to get scared, look at board agendas at 90 for board meetings at 90% of our community colleges and see how much of that is about student success or educational leadership.
Yeah.
And it's not at these schools, at the Aspen Prize and many ATD schools, of course, but it's all about who's getting the contract and the budget. And very rarely is it about how they're using that to then improve student success. And the machine works for that rather than for itself.
Other questions? Yes.
I'm Kevin Kuo. A few days ago, there was a front page article in the New York Times about NYU, New York universities, and some of their executives getting special loans to, I guess, finance a 35-acre estate or something like that. And, I realize NYU and the Ivy Leagues are different from community colleges, but what do you say to a student who faces, incredible tuition debt, and they say, well, should this college president earn twice President Obama's salary? And, should public service be something to be considered in executive compensation, say, different than, say, an executive at Exxon or DuPont, where, maybe it's just as hard a job, perhaps. But what are your thoughts on what I hear from some students complaining?
Be interesting to see what the stock options look like at a community college. But any thoughts about compensation and leadership?
Well, on the one hand, if we do not compensate our executives for the incredible tasks that are before them, there are other ways to lead a satisfying life. This is a very challenging and grueling role. And at least among community colleges, it's not very frequent that issues of overcompensation have been headliners in the newspaper. And I worry that because of the undercompensation of executives, and it's not just presidents. I have dean vacancies for years at a time. Who would want to take this grueling work at this relatively small pay? And so I think there is a call to service that is an intrinsic part of what we do, and it's not about simply being driven by the money. But to think that compensation doesn't matter is an error. And the care and feeding of our CEOs are very important if we want them to do this job.
And other leaders. Let me, with respect, say there's 2 problems of conflation in the question. But let me precede that by saying nearly every president I've seen go down went down because of a sense of entitlement. I very rarely see presidents go down because they did good, risky work. It's because they got self-absorbed. And it happens all the time in every sector. I think you're asking the right question in the wrong sector, though, in a way. We have a deep problem with what lies behind compensation, period, in leadership roles in the country, and the market will not solve it. And I don't know what the right solution is, to be honest with you. But The market's not the place to test every kind of value. There are other kinds of value besides market value. But finally, let me say, I understand the general concern about cost of college and debt, but I am really getting weary of being brought into that discussion as though we were the cause of it, meaning community colleges. Now, I don't have the data since the recession, but I had 40 years of it up to 2008. And here's what it showed. When you unconflate the data, if that's a word, and I'm not sure it is.
Sounds good.
Here's what it says. Proprietary institutions in real dollars over that 40-year period increased tuition 3 times the rate of inflation. Private independents increased tuition twice the rate of inflation. Public state universities increased tuition at 1.5 times the rate of inflation. During that entire 40-year period, community colleges increased in real dollars by 1%. Not 1% a year, 1% for over the 40 years. How do we keep getting pulled into this discussion of cost and price? It's nuts. So I get it, but this is, we need to go down a floor and ask the question.
Kay,
sorry
Kay,
for
I'm
that.
sorry, I think we called on 2 people at the same time. Kay and then Mark. Thanks.
It strikes me that this room is full of people who are sort of on board with the student success and college completion agenda, and thus maybe I shouldn't be surprised about what I'm surprised about, but I still am, both in the conversation so far. Forgive me for being mundane, but the question is about presidential leadership in the use of data and evidence as a tool, not as an end, but as a tool for change. Because it's my view that the changes in our field in those uses over the last decade have been transformational, and that a lot of the kinds of conversations we are able to have with boards and others are the conversations about data. Sandy, the mission, are we accomplishing the mission? So you've alluded to it.
Yep.
I think maybe we all take it so much for granted that we're just not saying it out loud, but I think it needs to be said out loud if we talk about how we're going to bring new leaders. I wonder if you would comment on that.
If I could just from the report's perspective, the third quality of exceptional presidents and change management, in virtually every step of that, using data to build urgency, using data to test effectiveness, using data for the continuous improvement process are absolutely critical. And I love the way you said that, because it really, what came through is it wasn't data for data's sake, but it was data in service of this particular set of goals around student success. And so the kind of data that were used sometimes were completion data, sometimes they were labor market outcomes for students. They were a variety of things that were being used in service, but a common element for all of these presidents was being comfortable using data and understanding that they would not know whether they had achieved the goals without looking at data.
So it is traditionally so countercultural in our sector that not to be very explicit about that, I think it's still premature, because we're still seeing a lot of colleges where you can't talk about bad news, or the capacity for using data is still very modest, if it exists at all. And so that's just a part of the whole picture.
So could I add to that, because my question was fairly close to that, not surprising, Mark Schneider. So I believe, we keep talking about student success, and we're talking about data systems to measure student success, and with some degree of urgency and some accuracy, et cetera. But I wonder, given the complexity of the student population and the goals that community colleges have, how do you define student success? How do you measure it? How do you get robust data systems? And obviously with the upcoming reauthorization of HEA, is this something that you need federal legislation on, or do you need states to act, or could you build your own internal systems or regional systems?
That's about 8 questions.
Together, I think
And combine them with K's, please.
Combine the answer. Let me respond first to Kay. Sorry for being oblique. In all of the conversations we've had about leadership for change, it's been about the lacking toolkit, not just tool, but a whole kit of tools, has been large-scale organizational change. How do you leverage deep change in organizations? And if you look at just as an example of how far we have to go with it, if you look at that curriculum process that Aspen did with graduate programs and all their courses, it's very hard to identify where those tools are mastered in people's formal preparation. And among them is data visualization and understanding data and inquiry and turning data into stories that mean something to your culture and all those sorts of things. So yes, it's huge, along with developing formal models of innovation to scale, which exist in many other industries, not in ours, along with, and to migrate here, yes, I think there's a role for government at several levels in this to help us with data comparability and to clear out the foolishness in the simple measures that are thrown around in public. Unfortunately, they're the cause of most of it. That iPads would continue to publish what they publish is shameful. It's just shame. They know it's rubbish, but their response is, well, we don't have anything better yet. That's just rubbish. So yeah, there's a role for them, particularly for informing the public discourse with measures that make sense, that are mission relevant, and that are granular enough to discern some pattern in them that makes a difference. But I think in terms of making data drive change in the organization, that's got to be in not just the president's, but the leadership team's toolkit in a big way. And it's been our steepest learning curve at Valencia for over a decade. We still think we're just scratching the surface. Everybody comes and copies our work. We think it's rubbish. So we're pushing hard. We've got so much to learn in that area.
Other questions? Yes, Narcissa?
A concern I have, because I know I appreciate the discussion around the important role of the board. But how powerful are really the boards in selecting these leaders? They make the final decision. But I'd like to hear from the presidents, particularly because there are advantages that state systems have, because the chancellors can make a more direct decision. But there are different points in the process of selection where the board really doesn't often get this choice. By then it's been filtered. So I want to ask at least the presidents to address that, because yes, we need the right kind of leader, or we need to develop the leaders we have to think this way, but are they going to get there?
So if state systems aren't accepting the challenge, stepping up and seeing the need for change, then state systems like local boards are going to favor the status quo. They're going to define success in traditional terms, and they're not going to be looking for people who have a different perspective. So that is an area that if the conditions aren't ripe, then you have that mismatch again. Yeah. And
what you may be alluding to is that there's a big chunk of search that occurs before the board actually ever interviews anybody. And is it Molly Broad has a really clever comment about that? What is it she says?
Well, she's not here, but now that you called it out, she said, boy, I hope I don't get myself into trouble here. When I was talking to her a little bit about this subject, she said that the process of choosing a board president occasionally, or sometimes, is that trustees remove everybody that the board might like. And then the board removes everybody that, that the faculty remove everybody that the board might like. And then the board removes everybody that the faculty might like. Yeah. And then the choice is made from whoever's left standing. Yeah. But I will say that the hope... Yes, absolutely. So the people in the change process. So I think, I'd like to just tell a quick story if I could. I have a friend who lives in a major US city that was engaged in the search for a community college president. And he learned that we had done this research and we're going to release that paper. And he asked if I would come speak. And it's a major 30,000, 40,000 student college. So this is not a simple group that would be engaged in that, in a major city. And I went to speak with them and met them at a coffee shop. And it was the head of the search committee, a couple of faculty members, Somebody from the mayor's office was on the search committee. So to your point about how complex this can get, and I walked through these 5 qualities of presidents, and they said, nobody's ever said that to us. And they were working with a good search consultant, somebody who's well regarded in the field, not you. But no. Perhaps with you they would have done this differently. But another of the good search consultants, Narcissa. And so what was fascinating though was that as I walked through these things, their eyes sort of lit up, and we stayed in touch over the course of the next 6 weeks. And twice they wrote back and said, they asked to put these 5 things up on a board, just to have the conversation. Say, this is what somebody who's looked into this has found. And they reported that it fundamentally changed the conversation. So I would suggest that the traditional way that we've been doing this, I'm not saying that that's going to happen everywhere and all we need to do is put up these 5 things and that'll change the world. But I do think the fact that we have not revisited this question in some time, nor have we put something together that is aligned to what we believe moves institutional success, is enabling people to operate on a whole host of things that are disassociated from one another. So the community leader will be really interested in certain things related to community development and continuing education, and the faculty will be related, and the business leaders, and all of them are right. But when you aggregate all of those things, you end up with a least common denominator that does not seem to align to what it is we need in the next generation. And so our hope is that this report can help inspire a conversation around what these qualities are. And the fact of the matter is that most people serve on community college boards, in part at least, because they want the institution to succeed with students. But nobody has asked them how or helped inspire this kind of conversation. So our hope is that this will offer something of a conversation starter that ultimately will lead to each board's North Star and each state system's North Star about what it is they're looking for in leaders. And we don't pretend that this report gives all of the answers. Our hope is that it provides a conversation starter with some really important things named in that.
There's a sense in which every search starts on the 3rd step instead of the 1st. And the 1st step is, what do you want this search to accomplish for you? And depending on the design of the search, it can accomplish various things. And most boards never have that conversation before they usually start the search with what are the criteria for what we want. And when they've done describing Jesus, Muhammad, and whoever, the search begins. And it begins usually on an assumption that it's going to be a beauty contest. We're going to run everybody through this, every cow goes through, we'll pick the high beef ones. And it's just crazy. That sort of filtering, whatever that's about. There's no, you can design better processes to achieve discernment of gifts and fit to the mission that you're trying and the outcomes you're trying to get than that process. But most boards don't start there. They start with step 3. So people like Narcissa Polonio and others who lead those searches probably today have almost an ethical obligation to insist that the board start with step 1.
I'd like to invite I'm sorry, Charlene, last question, Charlene Nunley.
I just have a thought of my own that I'd like to get the panel's reaction to. It seems to me that while we're very insular in our hiring practices, we're also very insular in the approach we take to leadership development. In other words, we teach ourselves. And it seems to me, and we're good. Hey, I'm part of that. We're good. These panelists are exceptional, and the best of us are looking to the future, and that's a good thing. But it seems to me the kinds of things we're talking about, like entrepreneurialism and communication and change management, there are so many experts from outside of our insularity that I think could be extremely useful to helping us prepare leaders of the future. I'd just like your reactions to that.
Lenore or Jean?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of talent out there that we can tap into and bring that into the community college system to try and shift the conversation. I'll go back to a story as we began the planning process for some of the student achievement initiatives. We made the initial mistake of starting the conversation with an external facilitator that came out of the business world primarily. And that caused all kinds of just conflict because the types of strategies that they were proposing were so contrary to the things that we had sort of grown up with at Miami-Dade College that the initial reaction was kind of a shock with this first set of consultants that we brought in. And so we decided to just put them off to the side, and we've sort of been using some of those strategies as time has gone on, almost in a stealth-like manner, but I think it goes to the point of if we're really going to move institutions forward, we need to start looking outside ourselves to bring in some of those models while still holding at the heart of it what our mission and vision is as an institution.
Jean, as you've done the leadership development, have you found value in?
Well, we've been obsessed with this point in terms of how intentional in the K-12 space, very little investment occurs around leadership development. Just to give you a indication of what I'm talking about, the U.S. Department of Education, a multi-billion-dollar budget, they spend 0.03%, 0.03% of their budget on leadership development. When you contrast that with a number of for-profit companies, Deloitte just built a $350 million facility focused solely on leadership development. Bowen has built a $200 million facility focused solely on leadership development. GE, and I can go on and on. And once you get into one of these companies, irrespective of what level you're at, you're expected to take ongoing leadership development courses. And within K-12 and clearly within higher ed, that level of investment is just not being made.
Great. I'd like to invite the panelists to make any final comments that you'd like. As you've reflected on the report and the conversation, what is the most important takeaway for the field that you feel that you'd like to share? If it hasn't been shared yet today, and if it's something that has been raised today, certainly feel free to reiterate that as well. Why don't we start with you, Lenore?
And I think I'll go back to one of the opening comments, which was, you know, a lot of our emphasis right now is around student completion and to what end. And I think the qualities that are listed in the report of successful presidents for the future is key to that conversation, starting with that passion for the students through change management and risk taking, because it's not just about the paper that the students are going to get at the end. And we're very busy right now, I think, looking at the processes to make sure that students complete a degree, that complete a paper. But we have to be willing to look a little bit deeper than that, and that's a challenge that shouldn't be taken lightly. And that's what's the quality of the programming behind that paper? And how do we make sure that we're not only giving the students a credential that has market value, but these are also the people that we expect to participate in our society. They are going to be the leaders in our communities. And so how do we take that passion for leadership? How do we take the risk-taking, the change management, and those connections to the community and tie all of that in? How do we bring the community into the community college so that those students that are attaining those credentials are not just attaining that market value credential, but are also attaining the skills that they're going to need to live in those communities? And I think that that's something that we need to make sure that we take a look at as we look to the next crop of community college presidents.
Thank you. Sandy?
I think I would want to make sure that the word learning isn't lost in the conversation, that what we're really after is leadership for learning, and that the other measures, credentialing, completion, and so on, are proximate measures for learning and imperfect at that. But the real mission is for learners to succeed, to learn more deeply, more powerfully, more completely, be able to put that learning to work. And that's often not a part of the preparation of leaders either. And you don't have to come out of an academic role to appreciate the importance of learning and discover together with your team how changing the organization changes the equation for your learners. So if you're there to create a particular kind of culture, I would say it needs to be a learning-centered culture, and knowing how to do that work as opposed to just any kind of culture would be especially important.
Great. Thank you. Jean?
So the report really resonated with me in the conversation around support of your trustees and risk taken. So what I'll do is actually I'll share with you a personal story in terms of why this really resonates with me and the potential implications. As you may be able to tell, I don't fit the typical profile of a CEO of a large size nonprofit. And about 3 years ago, the board was considering who they would bring on as CEO. And I was in conversations with the board. I was torn. Do I go in and talk about incremental improvements, share and be safe? Or do I go in and talk about the need that if we're serious about transformative gains for underserved students of color, that we needed to change our strategy, our program, our business model, our governance system, our brand, which basically means change the whole organization, right? People who've been running the organization for the past 10 to 12 years. And right before I went in to that conversation, I was given an opportunity to take on another role. And that fundamentally changed my perspective because I realized I had options. I had choices. And as such, I went in and I was bold, I was courageous, and it happened to work out. It was clearly the right fit. And it seems to me what's underneath all of the conversations we're having, what's underneath this report is a need for courageous leadership, both at the presidency level and with boards of trustees, with a realization that at times it won't work, but that if you fundamentally want to do for what's right for kids in the 21st century to allow them to be competitive, that you've got to be willing to take risks and do what's right. And if it doesn't work, then you transition the person out or the person leaves. That's the marketplace.
Josh, as I reflect on the work and the conversation, it strikes me that 40 to 50 years ago, this country was giving rise to a great revolution in post-secondary education through the creation of America's community colleges. There was a sense of exhilaration, an importance of an urgency of a mission, and there were foundations and government support to try to develop the leadership for this important new segment of American higher education. I don't see that sense of urgency or that recognition that we're at a critical stage in the life of our country and the roles that these institutions play in changing the outcome for our country. And it just strikes me odd that this conversation hasn't been of greater national importance, given what I've seen earlier when foundations and the federal government and even state governments stood up. We had university programs created around the country. Many of them are struggling to exist today. Many of them have folded. There is little or no incentive for young people to think about going into these careers because the cost of graduate education is so high. So I hope that this report is a springboard for a greater national conversation about the urgency of what is unfolding before us and the stakes involved for failing to act.
Thank you. I ask everybody to sit in the panel for just one more moment. First, join me in thanking the panel for this comment. And I know we're just at time, but I'd like to invite Carol Lincoln up to make a few closing remarks, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much, Josh. It's hard to make closing remarks after you've had such a powerful conversation led by these very supremely talented and committed leaders. What we wanted to do, though, was to make sure that you understood that there is a so what about all of this. This has been an incredible conversation, and we've identified some really challenging issues. What we're hoping this report will do and this conversation today will do is to, first of all, inspire all of us who are already committed to this and are in the process of developing leaders in the community college field and hiring and recruiting leaders, that this report will provide a lens for us to examine what we're doing and to see to what extent we're aligned with what is really needed in the field today, and take a hard look at what we're doing and consider what the implications are and what kinds of changes and new services and new practices we might want to do ourselves. That's first. But secondly, the other thing that we hope to inspire is that there will be a way for us to work together, to better align the work we're doing as individual organizations, to have it amount to more than the individual pieces that we're currently doing. We can imagine, for example, doing some collaborative work on developing some new tools like Ken Ender called for. How should I think about the questions that I should be asking candidates for the presidency? Tools for doing that kind of recruitment work. Curricula that we can all share in our various programs. So we'll get at better alignment between the kinds of things our leaders are saying needs to be embedded in our programs today and are not currently there. So we're committed to looking for those kinds of opportunities to align, to collaborate, and to work. And we would call upon everybody who is here today to think hard with us about what are the opportunities to take this report and take it into your field. What could you do with this material? What could you do with this video to help others that you're connected to, your networks, to get them to see this as an issue of concern and of possibility? And then one last thing I'd like to say is that Josh, we agonized a long time over the title of this report. And I remember many iterations ago, it was mostly about crisis, and then, you know, the Community College Presidency. And it is a crisis. We have tried to say there's an urgency about addressing these issues we've talked about today. But we ended up not leaving the title that way. We ended up eventually getting to saying this was crisis and opportunity. And that's something that we really probably need to spend more time on. This is a rare opportunity to really take advantage of the fact that there are people out there, as Lenore has reminded us, who can be sparked into these roles, who can be recruited into this work, who already know a good bit about student success that would be great candidates for taking the work to the next level. And it's an opportunity to find new people. It's an opportunity to take the folks whose hair is a little bit gray and who want to mentor and help the next generation come on board, learn how to do this work. So I would urge all of us to remember it is urgent, it's critical, it's in the nation's best interest. It's also a time of opportunity if all of us are willing to act and to act together on these issues. So with that, I would like to thank again the panel. I'd like to thank Josh for all the work you've put into this, Josh. You've been an incredible leader on this work, and we really appreciate it. To the panel, to those of you who have been serving as advisors in various ways, thank you so much. And all of you who are doing the daily work of really serving the students of America. Thank you so much for being here today.
Nice job. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I didn't mean to